Welcome back to the world of endless wars. The Wars world. So, with Advance Wars being a rather successful game on the Game Boy Advance, it's no surprise that a sequel was made. To sum it up, it was pretty similar to the previous, but expanded a little bit. The story ends where the first game left. So, Strum tried to conquer Cosmoland, as that's the name of the continent, by getting the four nations of that world to fight between themselves and then defeat them with one swift attack. However, since that failed, now he's decided to go for a full-fledged invasion, leading the armies of Black Hole Army. Although it's actually not the same place as it was in the previous game, so that was Cosmoland, and now we're fighting on a different continent. This is the Macro Land, so the map is a little bit different, and the maps themselves don't repeat. So Strum himself is supposed to be an alien, actually. Like, he doesn't look human. He is actually... It says in the description that he's an alien. And the Black Hole faction itself seems to have an alien-like appearance. They're not based on any real-life military, unlike the other factions of the game. However, they still seem to have human characters, mostly as their commanders, interestingly enough. They never really go into the details. Why would that be the case? Why is there no alien commanders? Or, like, why are humans working with the Black Hole Army? It's kind of mysterious and we can only speculate. Anyway, our four main factions have now united together under one banner under the name Allied Nations to fight the Black Hole. The game itself is, with the gameplay, it's pretty much identical to the first one, except that now we have more commanders, a new unit, and some more maps to play. All of the existing factions have some new commanders introduced as well. And there's a bunch of new Black Hole commanders now, so there's quite a lot of new stuff. There is a rather significant change to the gameplay now. So in the first game, every commander had a power meter and a commander power that they could use. The size of the power meter used to be universal, making the game kinda unbalanced since weak powers needed the same energy meter as strong ones did, so some characters were much better off in the first game. Now the power meter is divided by stars, so stronger powers will require more stars, so this evens the field a little bit. And there's actually two levels of commander powers now, so in the first game, there's only one commander power that you can use. Now you have the normal commander power and the super commander power. And the new super commander power can actually be super, as the name says. And because all of the old commanders also have this super commander power, it means that they're changed quite a lot. So some characters that used to be pretty average can now be actually quite OP. So Sami, for example, only used to have an infantry speed and firepower boost, which was decent. But now she has a superpower which allows her infantry to take bases in one turn, making her pretty OP since you can finish the game very quickly by taking the HQ in one turn. So in a way, while the changes try to make the game more balanced, just the fact that there's more commanders now and more commander powers, it actually makes the game also a little bit more unbalanced on the other side. As far as the balance goes, it's really hard to ultimately balance a game like this 100%. Because, like, chess is pretty balanced, because there's no commander powers, all of the units are exactly the same. The two players are just using their mind. Now, if every commander has different powers, and, especially if it's kind of diverse, you're gonna give this guy infantry bonus, another guy tank bonus. And if you have superpowers, imagine if in chess you could, I don't know, move the horse unit twice, and another player could use the fort twice. Balancing this would be pretty hard, and that's why this game isn't really balanced, and it will never be all that balanced. The tone of the game has actually changed a little bit now. It's a little bit less innocent than the first game was. Although all the characters are still in anime, are still portrayed with anime-like art, the game itself does take itself a little bit more seriously this time. For example, Andy looks a little bit older, Sonia no longer looks like a little schoolgirl, especially if we look at the Japanese version. Olaf, for example, no longer looks like a cartoon villain with a menacing smile. He looks a lot more serious this time. And in general, like, all the characters have slightly changed the way they look. Even if the design itself is the same, just the pose, the emotion that they're being portrayed with, it looks a little bit more serious, like their actual stuff, like their actual staff working in a military organization. Especially there's some after battle art now that actually displays realistic soldiers, realistic military equipment and destruction that gives the game a little bit more serious tone. There's even a photo of a real Tiger tank that the German army used during World War II. Although to be fair, like the fighting unit animation and all that, it's still very similar to the first game, so it hasn't changed all that much. But, you know, I actually kinda like it. The art style has changed a little bit, and it also fits with the story nicely. The first one was much more carefree, just story-wise, so story-wise, you were fighting random battles without having any serious point to them, you know, at least not until the end of the game. But this time the stakes are higher, clearly shown who the enemy is, and the four nations are now fighting for their survival, they're defending their nations, and they're no longer just having some little skirmishes that don't have any effect on the long term. So one cool thing about this game is that the commanders that you used to fight in the first game are now your friends. So it's pretty cool that your former adversaries have now become the friends that you work with. It's pretty cool to be fighting side by side with the characters that were the enemy in the first game. However, there is also one downside to this. It's the fact that because you're not fighting the commanders of the other factions, you're only fighting the Black Hole commanders. That means that you're fighting kinda less commanders, and they're not as interesting. So 2 out of 4 of the Black Hole commanders are kinda boring, to be honest. Flak is just a brute without any serious personality, and Eder is just full of himself. Again, he doesn't have all that much going on for himself. And their powers are also kind of meh, not interesting at all. So having to fight these characters for a large chunk of the campaign story is kinda lame, to be honest. But to be fair, the other two, Hawkeye and Lash, they're a bit more interesting. And of course, especially the main villain, Strum, he's pretty cool. But still, the commanders that you're facing in the campaign are much less diverse and much less interesting than they were in the first game. And to be fair, also the campaign does introduce some new mechanics, some new objectives, so there is some fresh air going on there. Talking about a serious tone, there was one campaign mission in particular that was quite memorable. It's a mission that takes place in Olaf's birth town, and after the game is over and after the battle is over and he examines the birth town that he used to grow up with, he seems to be seriously emotionally hurt by the damage that was caused there by Black Hole. So this is a strong contrast compared to the first game, where the stakes weren't really high. Losing a campaign wouldn't really be reflected in, you know, any serious loss. There wasn't a reference to damage or harm, so this has changed a little bit now. So when I was making the previous video, I think I kind of forgot to say something about the music. I gotta say that the music in this game is quite catchy and fun. One cool thing about the game, the way the game works, is that the soundtrack will always depend on the commander that is active that turn. So each commander has his own theme that's playing while the game goes on. The soundtrack definitely plays a huge part in what makes this game so memorable. Both games have decent amount of replay value. You also have a hard mode option for the campaign, and there's other maps you unlock, you know, that you can challenge yourself on trying to win them and then get a good score, and doing that will enable you to unlock new commanders and new maps. There's also a design map option that will even allow you to make your own maps, and using the link cable you can actually even give them to your friend. So this option allows you to be a little creative and could potentially provide you with lots of fun, although you are limited to free save slots only, so it is a little bit limited. But at least I always had a lot of fun with custom map editors in video games like this in general as a kid. Advance Wars 2 has a neat little feature that allows you to change commander color palette, and this seems to be kind of fun. And the cool thing is that the color palette that you change there will also be reflected in the opening intro. And I believe that's all that I have to say about the Game Boy Advance games, at least for now. They're pretty fun. I gotta say that it's definitely because of the colorful design and just the way they look and they sound. They're very memorable because of that, and you know, this is an old game at this point, and the fact that people still remember it definitely tells something about it. Overall, it's one of the best games on the Game Boy Advance, definitely, especially as far as turn-based strategy goes. There's not much that could stand up to it. unless except maybe Fire Emblem, but Fire Emblem's a game for its own. It's a little bit different. It's definitely a classic, and it just cries for some sort of a comeback on Nintendo Switch. So let's hope that Nintendo does something with it. You should also subscribe and all that stuff.